Detroit is different. Detroit is different here in full effect. This is a rarity. A guest back in full effect relatively sooner because the whole conversation that we had before and grounding and you getting a chance to know T and some of T's history and understanding really connecting to land and how we can repurpose land and use land as an asset and live within it in nature really goes back in her roots so much. And when we think about Detroit, it's a lot of that. So Tepfirah, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Definitely. We had a good pregame conversation with other homies and everything, and I'm pontificating on histories of Detroit and a lot of the role of people seeing me as the rebel rouser, the activist, the advocate, the community organizer.
And is.
And more so, I'm just a person with a couple of opinions that have been around from a couple of angles for a while. And with that being said, one of the big discussions that's been had in Detroit that every Detroiter that's in any level of bringing things together. So that could be business, that could be schools, that could be recreational centers, community organizing, churches, faith-based organizations. It's definitely a political question too. What do you do with all this land? Yes. Detroit is massive. Detroit has the ability for 2 million residents. And sometimes we think about 2 million residents being in Detroit and never reached that peak, like 1.8 million at one point in time, like around that figure. And that was a booming industry in Detroit. Many people coming here. And it's not just where people could live, so the housing for that. It was also the industry. People were coming here to work in many factories. So we look at the Packard plant and we think, wow, that's massive. But the Packard plant was of many plants. You know, we call it the big three. That's how we kind of think of it. We think of Chrysler, Ford's, General Motors, but at one point it was the big four. You also had American Motor Company and the Romney family connected to that, you know? So like the wealth and the industry and all the subsidiaries that connected, so much was poured into Detroit at one point in time. And it's just not like that. Let's give or take, I say 700,000 is being ambitious when we think of residents inside the city of Detroit, but somewhere between 600,000 and 700,000. Depending upon, you know, people taking the census. And I know a lot of people that's like, I ain't signing up for none of that stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's certain people that, you know, may travel through. We have a lot more of a transient American nowadays, not just a person in Detroit. So, you know, a person may live in Detroit for 3 months and then Airbnb in Miami for 3 months and then live out the country for 3 months and then come back or whatever. But let's say 700,000 and it's for 2 million. Plus all of this factory and industry space. There is so much land here in the city of Detroit. But inside these parcels of land, you do have residents, you do have homes, you do have places and spaces where people still go. It's a lot of, you know, spaces that I can think of pockets of like, okay, I just want to go to that one barbecue spot. Mm-hmm. That one barbecue spot is maybe, you know, 4 or 5 city blocks from, you know, other things that you would see as just common in a community, you know, even like a neighborhood like mine when I'm thinking, okay, I want to do this. And it's like, where do I go? How do you connect? You know, people often speak of the food desert issue.
Yeah.
It's a mini a desert issue in the city of Detroit just due to capacity. And like all Detroit things, it falls along racial lines as well. So T, Office of Sustainability and Sustaining, this definitely falls in your lap. We'll definitely talk a little bit about what solar farms could be, because that's where a lot of this discussion sparks. But other things, you know, the Detroit Future City Plan of consolidating the city, which many people said, oh, the Bing administration was crazy for thinking of that. You know, what are you going to do? You're going to be on the outskirts of Detroit. That's going to be Detroit East, Detroit West, you know, and things like that, or putting forests into Detroit, or gifting land to different community organizations and what that could be. What do you do in resourcing when the capacity and the bandwidth also are so connected to how this city functions, as tax base is a lot of the money that functions in the city of Detroit too. Mm-hmm. So that's a long 5-minute introduction, but I wanted to ground this discussion the right way so that we can get off into the branches of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And our tax base, you mentioned that, has to account for a city that has the capacity. So all of the roads and streetlights and all the things that a city needs to do, and then maintenance of the vacant land that you're talking about, is really a monumental issue.
Yeah. It's like, when you guys were kids, and well, I don't know, I went to some ghetto schools in my day. So like when you were a kid and you got your money for the pizza party, and the other kids didn't bring their money for the pizza party because they ain't got the money for the pizza party. So you wanted some extra toppings and some other stuff, but you just gonna end up with a basic pizza because your pizza party money is now going to be shared amongst everyone else, which this becomes a bigger discussion about resourcing and shared resources for residents, but Americans in general, because this is the land of the individual, the rugged individual. Self-interest, I'm thinking about me and mine, shout out MC Breed, rest in peace, and Tupac. You got to get yours, and that's not necessarily how a municipality functions, especially a municipality under this lens. So what are we looking at as far as land in spaces and pockets that could be used? What type of numbers? How many acres?
Yeah, I've been pondering this number for a long time, and there were so many reports back in the day that said like 40 square miles, right? What does that actually mean? One of the first things I did when I got to the city was like, what is the actual number, Mm-hmm. So I was just looking at this number because it's the number of properties that we don't receive tax income from, right? And so that is 5,000 acres, 5,000 plus. I'm going to say maybe it's 5,300 acres of residential. And then there's an additional 2,000 plus of commercial. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned industry. There's about 3,000 acres of industry. So we're at about 10,000 acres of vacant land in the city total.
So when you think of that, I mean, most people aren't farmers. We may need it in miles, but really, that's like a city within a city.
It is.
In different pockets, and it's not for those like me that were nerds that played SimCities as kids. It's not like so SimCity was a game where you simulate like being a mayor and you figure out where to put things. It's like I'm gonna put 2 airports next to each other, and whatever you want. And then the residents start rioting, and it's like, I can't live next here and stuff. How long you can keep your city going and be mayor, but it's not. It's a kind of like the grid behind you where it's checkered, where, it will be, vacant lot, vacant lot, vacant lot, home. Mm-hmm. Vacant lot, 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 home.
Yeah.
A couple blocks away on Pasadena, it's like that. Pasadena is a couple blocks away from Clements, where the Detroit is different. Studio is housed. It's almost like half a football field, a house, then maybe 2 lots, then another house.
Yeah, we're kind of like rural status in some neighborhoods,
and definitely, as I always say, it's like Detroit look like Mississippi in some spots. Mm-hmm. Not just because of that, but also because some of the people, y'all country. I'm just messing. Some country people in Detroit. So, I do a collard green cook-off, so it's not like I'm superseding this as well. You know what I'm saying? I know my people. I'm listening to blues too. So with that, this creates a different, I think, way of looking at how we share in this resource, because that resident is still looking at what could happen, and needing fire assistance, ambulance, police officers, water, I mean, just even thinking about the flow of water, if you've ever seen or been a part of like a home that was quote unquote rehab, buying one of those dollar houses, and the water was shut off and water getting cut back on, but it's not a lot of other homes on the block, and how long you got to run the water. Like, it's functional things that are set up where like technically that water is supposed to run from house to 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 house. And if it's running from house, plop, 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 house, plop, 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 around the corner, house, like, and then you get like some of our harsh winters. It's gonna do some different things in these water breaks, mainline water breaks that happen where it's like almost like a ice rink in some spots in my neighborhoods where that can happen.
Yeah. And I'll add to that because I don't know if we've talked about it in the last interview, but I worked at Greening of Detroit for several years, and I was a part of a vacant land crew there where we went out and cleaned vacant land in Brightmoor and North End. This was pre all of the stuff that was happening in Brightmoor a long, long time ago. So we, the things that we would find, right? The things that we would find, the things that I've heard gardeners have found in their lots, it can be scary.
Yeah, I mean, it can be scary. It's like it damn near that could be like a hoarders episode, or well, not hoarders, but what is that garage? What is it? The storage wars. It's boats and all types of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Not just all like, oh man, there's a dead dog in here. Like, some of that exists, but also it's just things you would not expect. Especially go back to the archives of Detroit is different, where I interview the CEO of Bailey Park. Shout out to Colin Mays connecting that whole thing. And Bailey Park really starts their initiative very closely adjacent to where Black Bottom was, where you were doing a lot of your work. And Bailey Park started because she was like, I was getting sick of these U-cuts. And the U-cut was basically saying, okay, they would cut around a lot of the tall grass. Sometimes the grass can be 4 or 5 feet tall. And some people.
And I mean, not to mention, I lived on the block like that. Yeah. My kids riding their bike, and you like, wait, where they at? They can't go on the sidewalk because it's grass leaning over, or somebody scrapped the house and they pulled all the glass out and all the stuff out on the ground. It's an issue.
It definitely becomes that, but I do have to say this, especially when my lady is your homegirl. It's like some people like free growth, and to see what native plants will grow, because native plants do grow when you let it grow, and
invasive growth too.
So it sometimes it may take 4 feet to realize that what you think is some weeds are like some herb that could be helpful. And it's a lot of that in Detroit too. Now, the movement for what that becomes, as I tell her often, it's going to take a lot of campaigns, because usually when grass gets about like half a foot, people are like, all right, now, this is messing up my look.
Yeah, I went on a green space tour last weekend, and they're like installing meadows. So I don't know if you're familiar with Callahan Park. It's
you got to tell me where. I don't know parks by name other than Belle Isle.
Okay, it's right out the Farnsworth area. It's a small city park, so it's like 2 acres. Okay, but they did the whole thing in meadow, an intentional meadow. So they had like, a small cutting, but it was huge flowers. I'll share you some pictures, but it's beautiful. And then they had these little winding pathways, just as an example of other things we could do in the city, farming, meadows, all these different treatment options that we could do.
And I think that's where the Joe Louis Greenway Project is another one of those concepts of what could be done. And with what could be done always comes back to like that elephant that exists in the room of not just Detroit, but America itself, and the race dynamic. As Detroit is so prevalently black, back to like the percentages. I personally think Detroit is still 85% black. On paper, you may say somewhere between 70 and 85%.
I always say 85.
So with that being said, because of the histories of America, the intentionality of why black people are here in America, functioning in this system, and I think many black folks were already in America, but functioning within the system of the American system is back from the exploitive and oppressive lens, but not being resourced. So many black families that lack that resourcing always see anything changing as this is going to impact me, where it's going to kick me out. And this fear that exists in our community is very real because it's the premise for that fear.
I was going to say it has happened. And I mean, we can go back to urban renewal back over in Bailey Park area with Black Bottom and all of the federal money that went into cities
Yeah.
demolishing black neighborhoods. And so that fear is absolutely real.
Yeah, and it exists. These are the stories that you hear from your grandma, and then depending upon where you live, you may hear from your cousins. When we grew up in an era where the skyscraper towers that were housing developments, often wrapped about in a lot of like New York raps of housing projects, were huge structures. I remember the Jeffs or the Jeffrey housing development, the Brewsters, demolished. And when you looked at the size of especially the Jeffs, I mean, that was many residents to be turned into like more townhomes. You can look at this, I think, in, I love pop culture, in episodes of The Wire. I want to say that was season 3, in the drop of the towers and how this impacts street culture too. But the housing connected to it. And then when we think about the massive amount of housing that was there that no longer is there. And also the argument can be made of it's not enough residents here because there's not enough low-income housing here, which low-income housing is another one of those. It's a Detroit discussion, but it's an American discussion as well.
Yeah.
And how do you define housing? So for me, housing should be 1/4, they say, of whatever your monthly income is. I think low-income housing should be 10 to 15% of whatever your monthly income is.
And I hear that, here's what we should do with the vacant land. We should put affordable housing here. And I think that could work in some areas. But it would be great if we were more intentional about that and said, like, let's put it in areas where we could also then create like walkable communities where we have a grocery store and a retail store and all of a school. Can we center around that walkability for that community, particularly for low income folks who may need more support with transportation?
I definitely, which that brings another one of those discussions I wanted to get into in reference to this. And we're definitely speaking way more from the macro than the micro of what per se. But I think let's put I see life like a big equation. Let's put all the variables in place, and then we can come up with possibly identifying some constants in this equation, because I don't think that we're going to get the solution. Definitely not today. And it's going to take iterations. It'll be a mix of many things, I personally think.
Yeah.
With that being said, the incentive for being a developer in housing is to profit. Even those developing low-income housing are not developing low-income housing to say, I want to develop houses so people can pay $100 a month here. There have been certain initiatives from people, back to pop culture, from what I've read. I haven't seen it. I haven't connected to it, but it looks like the one-time NFL running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Atlanta Falcons, Warwick Dunn, has done a lot of this because his outreach of feeling that housing instability he felt as a child has done a lot of work like this. But that's very admirable to be in that position. Rest in peace, President Jimmy Carter and Habitat for Humanity has done a lot of work in reference to that. And I've known people in Detroit that live in homes that have been rehabbed through Habitat for Humanity, and I've seen it work. But this also is not the incentive of what pushes the American engine itself. You're not getting into development to say to yourself, let's get people homes. You're getting into development to get paid. To get paid, it's in best interest of spending little input to maximize output.
Capitalism.
And that's not the science of low income housing. Hence, it's a lot of people that are sometimes in the space of low income housing that can, I think sometimes be well intentioned, but it can be very exploitive because back to the resourcing, like, you're housing for black folks. These are not necessarily the desirable resident historically, back to like our fears, but it
plays out
historically as well of any place, and then we look at the housing market right now. It's scary.
getting more expensive.
It's scary. Yeah. So then becomes it's so funny, like I've heard the joke 40 acres in a mural is what we've gotten in Detroit. So 40 acres of park and a mural is our reparations that we've gotten in Detroit. It's one of the funniest jokes I've ever heard. So, if you kind of get the whole concept of what was offered to people after as a reparation for people for what we faced in enslavement was 40 acres of land and a mule. We're given 40 acres of park in Detroit for what we faced in a mural of something in the city of Detroit. Probably not even painted by somebody from Detroit.
That's hilarious.
You know what I'm saying?
That's hilarious.
And then we get into if residents themselves could resource it, but the capacity of it. I was offered an opportunity the other day about like, hey, you can do this project and it's rehabbed and, you got an organization, 5,000 up front, probably another 30,000. And I'm thinking to myself like, okay, I believe if all things fall in place, it can move like that. But that is a very scary proposition, though this is something that would be great for Detroit is different. I'm in the driver's seat of like, where this is at. And all the people that support going to definitely be like, yeah, let's do it. But I've been there with the, yeah, let's do it. And then when I'm the one person doing, it's like, damn. You know what I'm saying? And then the project doesn't go through. And I feel a little bit like, OG and everything, my man Dabo, and what he's dealing with what's happening over there.
Yeah.
How does that look connecting to community? Like, how do you connect some of the resource to community, but help resource the community, bringing to life what could happen in their own neighborhood?
Yeah, this is a great question because you're saying not only are residents and people not resourced, but then we're saying also organizations, black organizations and black institutions aren't properly resourced and don't have the capacity to take on bigger projects. And yes, this is the inherent dynamic that we have in America. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
It's majority black city. And this is consistent with not just Detroit, definitely Jackson, Mississippi. Shout out Chokwe Antoine. Consistent with, you look at DC inside those communities.
Yeah.
You look at Newark, New Jersey.
I mean, that's...
And Mayor Baraka, shout out Mayor Baraka too.
Yeah, that's the basic premise that I definitely got too as I was exploring black nationalism. Like, I don't know if America is necessarily a place where fundamentally and as a whole, black communities will be successful.
So let's get into something you spent a lot of time in and still connected to, growing itself. And the resource of that. Where does agriculture look? And I have my own 2 cents from you of communities stepping up in more in an agricultural lens, which is even the gateway of leading you to the office of sustainability.
It sure is. And, actually, I just ran those numbers. I come out of an organization called Keep Growing Detroit, and they have programs where they're kind of tracking the number of gardeners that we have in the city. And when we, I asked like, how, like, what is the acreage of gardens that we have? We talked about we have 5,000 acres of vacant land, right? And I think that they estimate about 100 acres of community and market gardens. And I say community and market because those are the ones that are not just like in somebody's backyard, but I'm talking about like likely to be side lots in those, 7, 8 lots in between two houses that you mentioned. So community market gardens that go get plants from Keep Growing Detroit. Shout out. Go get your fall crop. Uh, are at about 100 acres for the city, right? So, uh, it's a lot to tackle. It's just a lot. The sheer numbers.
And and I can say like this is and let's stay here for a while because you have so much experience here.
Sure.
And this has been a year that I've been more atop of the growing, and it's good. Like people are coming, grabbing collards and everything. Watermelons caught this year,
All right.
so that's cool. It's still man versus pest. In reality, I mean, they outside. It's like that's their crib. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Exactly.
Buddy's looking at me like, "What you talking about, man? I'm eating this." So
It's good food right there.
so yeah, it's like I'm feeding the ecosystem.
Right. Thank you for the local organic food.
Shout out to that dragonfly getting down on some of them insects earlier. This becomes that reality of I do believe that resource is a great resource because now it becomes functional where, okay, not only is it putting the land to use, but it's also giving food for a community. That is a reasonable concept. Then you get into some of the functionality with growing. But from what you saw with Keep Growing Detroit, what have been the barriers of entry, you think, from some people activating growing in their community?
Oh, well, there are a couple. First of all, I don't want anybody to underestimate the amount of time, energy, and effort it takes to maintain green space.
Can you repeat that?
Time, energy, and effort it takes to maintain gardens and green space. It is work. It is actual physical labor that people are putting in. When you think about farms outside of the city, it's mostly mechanized farms, tractors, and somebody just basically pushing a button or riding a tractor around all day, collecting their harvest or planting out the field. Most urban farms are planting by hand, tilling by hand, weeding by hand. It's a lot of work.
So explain what tilling is, because I'm about to get down on some of it relatively soon.
Mm-hmm.
I did get my fall crops, but I got to clear some space for boxes.
Okay, yes. So when you turn over the soil, or if you have raised beds, when you turn over the soil in the raised beds, you're basically starting fresh for a new crop.
And in the capacity of this, do you see possibly the relationship of developing a skilled workforce to support a community in some of that, because it does become so labor intensive?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I've been in an apprentice, a farm apprentice, which is a labor force. I've run apprenticeship programs. I've run training for and workforce development programs in farming. It's an absolute thing, and it's also not as easy as one might imagine, because the amount of money that you're going to be making off an urban farm, the margins are very thin, right?
So let's, I guess, go there too. So my boxes is pure community, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not charging people or anything. It's like, come up, snatch something,
Mm-hmm.
clean up something. I feel like it's good, and it connects me to community in a different way. And I recognize that having the luxury of time to invest in that, to grow from that and not charge for
Yeah.
it. I'm I'm in a strata that many people would not be, especially in a community like mine. Do you think we shouldn't see all the growing as some for-profit growth?
I mean, yes, we should. Is it? Well, yeah, we should make money off our produce.
So
Some
you
people,
think,
whoever wants to. You know
okay.
what I'm saying? I'm not against making money off of produce.
And with that, it becomes also like okay, the collard green cook-off for you all, just introducing this whole concept of where things go. So the collard green cook-off, I pay $5 a pound for many of the growers from the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund.
Shout out. Whoop whoop.
And even me paying $5 a pound from them is less than the $7 that Eastern Market's paying. The reality is, ain't nobody about to buy $7 and collard greens for $7 a pound.
Thank you.
So this is like almost like a stopgap that does exist too.
Yeah.
When you think of what it takes to even grow a pound of collard greens,
Right.
and then it's like, damn, I can only get $7, and that's $7. It's not like it's like $50. So a bushel of tomatoes, like when we think of like the farmer's market farmer, like when you really sitting and talking to people in the community, and chances are, sadly, we don't eat enough vegetables. so it's gonna be some of the OGs that want to cop some, and that may be like, I don't know, that may be. You may sell a whole basket of tomatoes for $5.
Yeah. I mean, that goes deep because the foundation of our food system is enslaved people as the laborers.
And I would even go as far as to say, even today and internationally, this is where the food insecurity Detroit Black Food Sovereignty Network even comes, or Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network comes back into play as well. And the necessary, what's necessary with that, because this becomes sustainability for us all as the international scope. So this is larger than America itself, of the way that we're resourcing getting our food is just starting to change, just as the international markets are changing. It's amazing that I can buy bananas all year round for almost the same price. That's an American reality.
Yep.
That is not the reality across the world.
Yep. And it skews our perception of what
The value of what this is and what it takes. I'm buying pineapples completely out of pineapple season.
for $3.
And I probably should be paying like $25 for this pineapple. Like literally, I know y'all thinking like $25 for a pineapple? $25 for a pineapple. Hence, as that reality is going to start manifesting, I do believe that Detroit is a perfect place to think of growing. But then we get back to like what you say, the labor. It's labor intensive. And the key thing that I often, and you were one of the people that I connected, if you go back in time, me starting my growing journey, it was like Baba Malik said, talk to you. And when people say, wow, your garden is, we'll walk over there after this, and I'll give you some collards. I'm actually cooking some collards right now on the stove, slow burn.
Oh, I'm about to say, you better go get those.
So, slow burn, I got this. So what I run into with many people is like, okay, I want to get my grandma, I got the plot of land where they tore down my grandma's house, and I want to go there, and that's where I want to have my farm.
Yeah.
I live in Southfield, or I live on the other side of town, and I'm going to just drive over there, and that's where my farm going to be.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, I'll be like, you're going to walk away and abandon that farm probably within, I don't know, half a summer. They say, why would you say that? Because I'm like, are you going to feel like waking up every day, driving over there, either at sun up or sun down? I'm a sun up guy.
Okay.
It seems like mosquitoes aren't as active as sun up. And getting out there and watering and tending to it. Are you going to feel like doing that?
Right.
And also, what's the water source that you have?
That part.
Connecting to what's going to happen too. The irrigation system, if you all want to get more agricultural about it. It becomes very important
Yeah.
because without water, you ain't growing.
Right. Right. All the infrastructure that you need. Also security, where you put your tools and all of that stuff. So
Yeah, and I've seen so many different community gardens abandoned, well-intentioned, great people, but just not able
capacity.
to commit because of the time and that capacity, and even me included. Like as they grow, I'm watering. I got 8 boxes. I mean, technically, if I'm watering like I need to water, that's 45 minutes every day. You know. Now, one of my boxes is huge.
I'm about to say, and you're like on maybe half of a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm
So
half of a lot. and, and I think this is me by myself, but I do believe community will pour in more as
yeah.
I'm connecting more and building systems, because I guess that's where the apprenticeship programs happen.
And that's, I mean, I'm glad you said that, and I'm about to diverge a little bit. But when we look at how food production historically has happened, it's taken much more of our society to focus on food production in past years. So maybe 80% of the society was focused on food production. So when you talk about community come out or the apprenticeship program, but it was like your family farm, and everybody got out there and did what they had to do. And that's how or the whole village.
Yeah.
All the women in the village go get the corn, and all the men go get the, you know what I'm saying, beans, and we put it all in the pot.
Yeah, a TV show that used to aggravate me, like Little House on the Prairie when I was a child. or if you're more academic, the book I had to read in school, Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Guns, Germs, and Steel.
You know. So as we pivot, now we're talking about, when we speak of farms, the idea of solar farms existing in these spaces as a way for renewable energy to be grown. And I'm definitely one of those people on the critique of right now, what could be led is an initiative for this to power a lot of municipal buildings. My big critique is like anything that comes from tax dollars should benefit residents immediately. That's just that's a Khary hard line.
I want to challenge something, Khary, because there's a couple things I could challenge in there. But I'll just stay right here. When we say that the energy is going to power municipal buildings, there's two things in there that I would challenge, and that is what is actually a municipal building? It is I know, we don't like the city, we don't like government, but in any structure or form, we have to have shared assets as a community. So that's our fire stations, our recreation centers, our police stations. I know let's not go down the rabbit hole, but we need some type of situation for accountability in our communities. We have places where you hold district meetings. In a world where we had a better relationship with government as a people, these would be considered assets. When you look at a socialist structure, right? I mean, a lot of people, when we talk about capitalism, that we have to also look at socialism. And these assets are held by community, are held by government, right? And so I want to just, for 1 second, even though I know it is difficult to go beyond the harm that government has imposed on people, right? But just for a second to imagine when we are governing ourselves, or if we were governing ourselves to begin with, these will be our local assets. And even though we've gone through the history that we have, like on some level, these are community-held assets. And so to say that we are going to invest in community-held assets as opposed to individuals is actually a socialist concept.
And see, and this is where my critique of the functionality of the ways that things have happened in Detroit most of my lifetime are a little bit different. Because also, yes, under that premise, definitely like a recreation center, yeah. A police station, even me saying this, and
I'm about to say.
very rarely I would call the police, but calling the police, they do serve a role in community. And it definitely, maybe not even for me, but for others, definitely. A fire station, definitely. In Detroit, the dynamic is Little Caesars Arena is a municipal building.
That's not on the
Because
list.
of
That's
the-
not on the list.
But because of the public-private partnerships that are existent here, as the city of Detroit needing assets that can become a business asset to offset monies that are needed to resource the city. Like, that's the argument for it. Great interview with Theo Pride this year earlier, where we're really talking about where did these public-private partnerships really begin happening. And many of the public-private partnerships began happening as state and federal government decided to not resource a lot of black leadership stepping into roles like Coleman Young. So Coleman Young starts a lot of this because it's a need to make money for the city. So the city becomes a business. Then, so the Downtown Development Authority, our largest tax base is captured where all of that money stays downtown. Because of what was happening downtown with a Coleman Young administration is businesses immediately say, oh, hell no, I'm out of town. The minute black leadership steps in, and Erma Henderson and Ken Cockrell Sr. and many of the others.
Yeah.
And now what we have is that system still in place, and it's not functioning under the origination of where it was. So many of our municipal assets are assets that are public-private entities.
If it would be helpful, I'll double check that this is public information, but I can share the list of 127 buildings. I don't. It's
And
not. It's not Little Caesars Arena.
this is where this is where and this is me in my, what I consider, as people may say, conspiratory, but it starts here.
Okay.
But then it ends another place.
Okay.
My foray into a lot of this work starts with my parents, Greg and Jan Frazier, rest in peace, Ma. Day you passed was a couple of days ago. Beginning the work before the Keep the Vote No Takeover movement even had a name. And what happened during my time in the emergency management of the schools and our school board not having access to things. What started as that $1 billion bond capacity, David Sneed, what he did, and all of those people, and people stepping in, and Governor Engler saying, hey, we got to step in and help these kids. They don't know anything.
Yeah.
And then the state controls the school district for over a decade. Now we have an elected school board with debt and so many things that in the beginning it was this, but what ended up happening was so much more nefarious.
Yeah.
Because historically nefarious things happen, and you can be a lot more asleep at the wheel and things can go off the rails. I mean, look at the people in Flint. When you have a lot of black people that you're going to be providing assets and resources to. And the argument can be made that that's poor black leadership. The argument can be made that this was always designed like that. The argument can be made that, certain people didn't do the right thing. The argument can be made that like people like me are just crazy altogether. But I think many of the, as they say, two things can be true. I think maybe like 25 things can be true in reference to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. The mistrust.
This episode of Detroit is a very interesting episode of Detroit. Hence, Detroit is different.
Detroit is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the rallying cry, when we think of the roots of advocacy and activism that starts in the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
the acceptance of some of the things that have happened and the apathy of people connecting to anything where they feel like they can have a semblance of having something is tough. So to many residents, double home value, or if it's not that, to get $90,000 is a godsend, but it's exploiting the calcified. So calcified is a term that basically, like, over time, it basically calcifies. Like if you got a wound, like this bone I broke, that calcified into like a fixed bone, even though it's not fixed,
Right.
because it's come together over time into, you can exploit so many people from an impoverished position. Would these people be making this decision if the city has been resourced? And so much of this all deals one with the other.
Yeah.
A school system that deals with what the school system dealt with from emergency management under that initiates with John Engler and leadership of David Adamany directly impacts residents here, because the number one thing that most people, you cannot say this is a good or bad neighborhood if you're a realtor, but the way they say that is basically say, this is a good school system. Let me tell you what a good school system is. A good school system is a lot of people that don't.
Yeah.
So this is where things go. So you suppress a school system that at that point in time when me and you were going there, and it's one of those key gateways from your interview, is the only school system in America on a national basis that has an African-centered education model. Shout out Kwame Kenyatta and the people that were behind that, building that for years and decades.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get that school system $1 billion capacity, and now you get a Republican conservative governor that's like, oh, hell no. We about to step in and bust that down.
Okay.
And this has a direct correlation on how residents are resourcing here. Hence, that impacts the tax base. Hence, people don't want to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And hence, we even have an active city now with no residency and stuff. I mean, so many people work in the city, don't live in the city. I mean, people that work for the city don't live in the city.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where you end up with a resident where you almost can't offer them anything because they haven't been talked to. They felt abandoned. They felt neglected for so long. It's like, anything, because I should have been left.
Mm-hmm.
And you're exploiting the opportunity of someone in a destitute manner.
Yeah.
I forget the legal term of that, and everybody thinks like, oh, Khary thinks he is an attorney. It's a term, but it's something where a person is in some of their most dire positions beforehand to end up in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And so many residents, especially in communities like mine, are in that position, and it's very tough because it's like, damn, that is a good deal for you. But it's a good deal because
the context
of all of this, like what did KRS-One say? You must learn. Shout out KRS-One gonna be at Avalon Village when you talk about a place that needed resources. So you know what I'm saying. And it's like let me tell you why.
It's no doubt about it. It's no doubt about it that these neighborhoods that we're talking about building solar fields in are some of the most divested communities that we have. And so where do you start? And when we look at those blocks, so one of the communities, Van Dyke Lynch, over there by the airport.
Yeah.
You have a 40-acre siting area where the solar will go. And you have, I have the numbers in my PowerPoint here, but I want to say it's less than 10 owner occupied. And I want to say it's closer to like 7 or 8 owner occupied homes in 40 acres. Mm-hmm. I understand. I'm not discounting the history at all. You see what I'm saying? Like I totally empathize and I totally see the harm that has been done to these communities, right? And the position that these communities are in. And what do you do? And where do you go from here?
Like I say, we're going to just make some constants in this equation. I don't know if I can get to the solution personally.
Yeah.
So I do believe that this is.
But that's what
on
the city
table.
is charged with.
And that's where, hence, those residents, even around that area within the circumference, definitely deserve access to that solar power.
Absolutely.
Directly.
Absolutely.
Which I know that goes against something in the Michigan Constitution. It's like almost everything that's for
No, it's
residents.
it's state legislation called community solar, and we talked about it's House bill such and such and such. It's been through the House, it's been to the Senate. They haven't taken a formal vote on it, but for us to allow that, it's not that utilities can't do it. It's that we can't force them to do it.
And this is also part of the other concepts of things in it, going to Walsh, it's like you have necessary monopolies, as they say. Those are utilities. The challenge with the necessary monopoly here in Detroit is DTE is traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
The money DTE even made during the COVID crisis is shocking. Even when they talk about warming and cooling centers, during the time I was, connected to some of those people, which, Lord knows, shout out to those people. I mean, it's not like you working for DTE is like you're evil, or working for the city you're evil or anything. It's just the dynamics of some of the functionality how I see it.
Absolutely.
People may look at me and what I'm saying is I'm crazy and evil. So I would.
Can I come at the argument from a different angle?
Yeah.
Because yes, we agree right here, and then we get to this point where it's like, okay, what to do, right?
Yeah.
So we're both there. Agree. What to do. From another angle, let's look at the environmental angle. The planet. That's my baby. Yeah. Love the planet. Mm-hmm. Shout out to the planet.
I got you. Yes.
The destruction that industrialization has wreaked upon the planet in terms of carbon emissions, ozone, all of the things that are inside when you look at that coal burning plant that are going up into the air and into your lungs, and now your baby got asthma. Mm-hmm. Now your husband got heart issues. There's something in the air. This is also something we need to solve for.
So from that, and definitely connecting in solidarity, and I've had these discussions, which I'm more. I guess I have more of a grandiose view where people may say, "Oh, you sound crazy." I personally think we as humans can destruct the earth for us, but the earth itself it's the gravitas of it, as our arms are too short to box with God in my mind. But that doesn't mean don't dismiss it, because I'm team earth and I'm team human more, So
if we destroy the earth for humans, that's a concern.
Yes,
I'm not saying that the earth won't bounce back, and after we gone, it's gonna re-up itself. Yeah. All of that.
Will always exist, or if you know my community, cockroaches, they looking at humans like, look at these doing stupid stuff to themselves. Let me get my roach out. Cousins exist. So, but with that, I'm definitely concerned about the impacts of different environmental things. I mean, so many people were shocked. I got so many text messages like, they closed Belle Isle Beach because of E. coli.
I know.
And I'm like, okay, these are the functionalities when you talk about city government, because city government's always testing water for if E. coli is there. Beach water, the water you drink, and all of this type of stuff. Like, hence you need governments to exist, because if the government wasn't testing for that, you'd just be swimming in E. coli all day.
Yeah.
And who's testing it?
Yeah.
So, your homie that put a pond in the backyard, more power to him, but you better be cleaning the hell out of that fish if you plan on eating it, because like, who knows what's going on, because of the emissions and what can impact from the environment. So I definitely think that what could be sustainable does become it, it it's a pivot that or making a pivot almost makes it seem like way less that yes is real, that there need to be many more ways that we do things. But this goes back into some of those arguments, and I'm not as anti-capitalist as you, but it goes
You
against the
aren't? Oh,
art
you're not. I forgot.
of the design of this nation, because the idea of this nation is to profit as much as possible. Little bit of input, maximum output. So yeah, I'm designing your car to always have gasoline. I don't want you to have a car where you can put some water in it.
Yeah, I want you to be dependent on me in perpetuity.
I need you to re-up. I need to give you, you know what I'm saying? I need that.
And it don't matter that I had to drill and drill and drill out the earth to get it. I don't know really what this substance is. I don't know how much we have of it on the planet. It don't matter.
Yeah.
But I got my bread.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, more than the bread, I think sometimes it's the money, sometimes it's the access of control, it's the layers of what could function and happen. And back to our political system, I mean, these are the people that got money for lobbyists. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The it's good to watch an Aaron Brockovich movie, but the reality is that be that exhaustive and do stuff like that, it takes a hell of a fight. And there are some community victories, and I do believe that community can come together, but it does take an attitude to overcome and not accept and not even have the defeatist attitude. But the defeatist attitude, especially in communities like mine, can be very prevalent because
Absolutely.
many people can be just distraught from looking at what we define as blight. I see all these houses on my street, and what another person may see as blight is like, I knew the family that lived there. So
Yeah.
it's like, that's still Paradise House. Kenny Boy stayed there.
Yeah.
But for you, you're going to see a couch half upside down and and railing upstairs. Like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
It's going to look like something out of, what's that scary movie they shot over here not too far? Don't Breathe 2 or something. To me, it's like, oh yeah, Kenny Boy was over there. I beat him in Sonic.
I mean, it's
2
the same way with vacant land, because you can look at it from a deficit point of view, and then, but once I start getting into like plants and like your lady friend, all the herbs and things that we could eat I start looking. It looks different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody not gonna pick up some leaves and say to themselves like, this is a healing modality. They're gonna be like, hey, cut that grass,
down.
you
Yeah.
know? And that has energy too, because we're also functioning as marketing is my thing. We function within a society, and society has an idea of how we look at so many things. So with that, I want to leave you in close. I know this was a macro. I've been wanting to have this discussion anyway, as this is a needed, necessary discussion. And like all Detroit is different, I hope this triggers your critical thinking about what could be done with a lot of this land.
Yeah.
Because I definitely don't got all these answers. But what would you like to share in reference to? Because you saying 10,000 acres of land. 10,000 acres of land is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, 1 acre is about 13 lots. So if you're trying to imagine it, I mean, it's a lot of land. I think that, when we think about a perspective of governing ourselves and understanding that we have to pose solutions, and they're not going to always be black and white, extra perfect in the bow. You go off of what the information you have at the time and the resources you have at the time, and you step forward. And yes, you got to step forward in a way that is listening to community. You have to step forward in a way that's looking at our historical past and some of the wrong things we've done in the past, and making sure that we learn off our mistakes. But there comes a point where you gather all the information and you have to make this step forward, given the best information you have. I think that the solar project is a viable project for some of the vacant land in our city. I understand it comes with different sets of controversy. I was skeptical at first. I come from the urban farming background where urban farmers were like, what? I had a couple farmers like, hey, I wanted to grow over there where that solar field is going to be. And guess what? Had a conversation. Mayor took that right off, took those neighborhoods off. You know what I'm saying? And so there are community members, though, who are sitting, waking up, looking at vacant land every day. And they're like, I don't want to look at this anymore. I don't want to clean up that lot anymore. I don't want to call the police because somebody, or the city because somebody them dumped, or I need a solution. And so we move forward with the best information we have. We have this unique opportunity where there are federal tax incentives to do renewable projects for anyone. Anyone can, but cities definitely make this project feasible for the city. I've looked at the numbers. The city's not getting rich off of this project. We're actually paying money each year to generate clean energy, to put more clean energy into the grid. And at the end of the day, when we look at the mix of energy that we have, energy is kind of like food in a way, because it's one of those things that's invisibilized in our society. Where does your food come from? I have no idea. I just went to the grocery store. Where's your energy come from? I have no idea. I just turned the light on. You know what I'm saying? And we get lazy, and we don't understand what it takes to get that food to your plate, or what it took to get that energy when you turn on the light. But what it took to get the energy that turned on your light is for coal to be pumped up into the atmosphere. And that has to change. Not only has all nations have gotten together and said that has to change. That was the Paris Climate Agreement. That was 2015. Nations made a treaty with each other and said we're going to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we put in the air. Trump pulled us out of that in 2017. In Detroit and Duggan stood up and said, we're going to abide by those commitments we made as a nation. And we made a strategy for how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions that the city is responsible for. How do we transition to clean energy? And we could have, like Chicago and Cincinnati, purchased a bunch of rural farmland and got a bunch of farmers pissed off. But we could have put a big solar field outside the city, and it could have been used, the credits could have been used to offset city billings. But we have 10,000 acres right inside the city that are in neighborhoods that could we make this something cool, something beautiful? As long as I'm on the project, that's my aim. My aim is to make people excited about green energy. And I know that cities are going to look different. There might have been a time when you looked at, they installed a rail line and people were like, what is that ugly thing? When they installed all those transmission wires, now we don't even see them. We don't even see substations. It's not even a thing because it's something we're used to. But as we look at transitioning from coal to clean energy, as we look at the future, our cities are going to be looking different. We can't do things the way that we have, because the way that we have exploited people, and it has exploited the planet.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be having more conversations about this on and off. I love that you definitely spoke to that, and I just want to give this point in the world of Khary and your critical thinking for the viewer. I'm definitely understanding of as Shamika Nichols, that leads Solidarity, always speaks. The movement for energy democracy is a movement that starts in our communities, in Black communities. When I say our communities, and the history of it is there. some of the ways that that movement is even becoming more of a corporate structure, definitely we need to be aware of that, because those same exclusionary, exploitive tactics that some of those railways and freeways and other developments have done over time have definitely impacted our community. It should be done. We just need to make sure that it's done equitable and it's done with us in a position receiving opportunity and resources from what's happening with it, in my perspective.
And we agree.
There we go.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.